23rd chapter of Luke. We're going to read from verses 39 to verses 41. As you recall, Jesus had been crucified between two robbers. And here's where we pick up the narrative. And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, "If thou be the Christ, save thyself and us." Well, I guess he couldn't have done this because he would have been crucified, right? Verse 40, "But the other, answering, rebuked him, saying, Dost thou not fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation?" Verse 41, "And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss." Today I need to deal with two particular questions we touched on last time. And I think we need to be agreed on the answers to these two questions before we can proceed onto the topic of salvation and the atonement proper. First of all, what does it mean to satisfy justice? The second question is more important. Who is required to pay so that justice may be satisfied? We say that when a person is just, he's good, he does that which is right, he does that which is equitable, and he's fair. He does that which is fair. So that when a precept of the law has been violated, we inquire as to what it means to be just, or what is the equitable or fair or good response to a transgression, or better yet, the transgressor. Notice also that the phrase "to satisfy justice," you're not going to find it anywhere in the Bible. This is an aspect that some people have incorporated into their theology. Now, the concept of satisfying justice, it's biblical. We find that when people have broken the law, that they have to pay the penalty. They have to satisfy justice when they're being punished. But does it apply to the cross? What Jesus did on the cross? Was there a satisfaction of justice that took place there? This is why we want to take a look at this question, what it means to satisfy justice. And, of course, the second one, who is required to pay? Although I think the answer is really obvious, it has been doubted. And it's because there are those that are prone to argue that I think that we need to get on the same page before we can talk about salvation and atonement. We need to take a look at the 3 R's. Okay? You know what the 3 R's are? No, it's not reading, writing, and arithmetic, Bubba. We're talking about the 3 R's of practical Christian theology. Now, you all know that when you have a government or a kingdom, every government or kingdom, real or imagined, has 3 basic aspects to it. We have the ruler. He's the king, the governor, the lawgiver. We've got the ruler. That implies the ruled. Those are the subjects of the governor. Okay? The citizens. And then we've got the third aspect, the rule. Rule implies law. It's the same thing. So we've got a ruler, the ruled, and the rules. And God is a ruler. He's got people that he rules, and he uses rules to do it with. He uses the law. And there's also the gospel. But we're not going to deal with the gospel just yet. We'll get there. We're on the early pages of this book here so far. What is law? Well, when a ruler has people that he's responsible for, that he's governing, he has to have rules in place. And so what he does, he's got precepts. Now, a precept basically either requires or prohibits a particular course of action. For instance, in the Bible we find precepts such as, "You shall not murder," "You shall not steal." These are precepts. Now, what a ruler does is he takes a precept and he attaches a penalty to it. And when he attaches a penalty to the precept, it gives it the strength, the force of law. So if you have a precept And what you do is you remove the penalty. You know what you're left with? You're just left with the precept. You know what another name for that is? It's called advice or suggestion. Have you ever heard of the 10 suggestions? No. You've heard of the 10 commandments, but not the 10 suggestions. So a law without a penalty is simply advice. There are reasons for the penalties and for the precepts, of course. There are several questions that the answers should be obvious to us. For instance, why are laws necessary? Whose benefit is chiefly intended by the laws? Is the benefit chiefly for the ruler, or is it for the ruled? Who are supposed to suffer the penalties? Why does a ruler attach a penalty to the precept? Oh yes, are any of the subjects exempt from the precept? And of particular importance is this question: what danger exists for the governor and the government and for the people if some of the subjects are exempt? Also, is it ever just or required to punish the innocent or obedient persons? Here we got the ruler, the ruled, and the rules. A quick look at God's laws. They tell us that the intent of the precepts is to protect and promote the safety, the peace, the survival, and the well-being of all the subjects. And these are God's own interests. These are the interests of every ruler, of every government. Remember that before God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that he gave his laws. He attached penalties to the laws. Why? Because he loves us. His love for his subjects is expressed in his having attached penalties to the precepts. So the penalty expresses the value, the importance that the ruler, the lawgiver, places on the precept and the interests that the precept is designed to protect. So what he does is the ruler, he suits the penalty to the crime. Some people don't like to equate crime and sin. Well, it's still transgression, so we can say that. He suits the penalty to the transgression. Because there are some things that all governments have in common. We need to acknowledge this. We need to be on the same page on that. Because God is a ruler, we're his subjects. The second point here is the penalty, since it's an expression of the ruler's benevolence, his love or his goodwill, this penalty is a motive to discourage disobedience to the precept. Third, the ruler attaches a penalty to the precept as his pledge to uphold the precept. It's his pledge. And penalties, they also teach, or they send the message that God's laws must apply to all his subjects without exception. Now, President Obama has stated that he supports the death penalty in certain circumstances pertaining to certain crimes, one of which is when people use weapons of mass destruction. What if, hypothetically, his daughters joined Al-Qaeda or some fanatical Islamic group and they bombed the White House, killing a lot of people? What should the law require of them? Are they to be exempt? Should Obama back off on his stance against the death penalty in the case of his daughters? What effect do you think that is going to have on the entire nation if a ruler decided to do that? That's the question you need to address. These are kind of things that your conscience should be able to answer. These are self-evident answers, and like I said before, only those that are inclined to argue will be able to disagree with me on these concepts. Now some, again, they're inclined to argue, they're going to disagree, and they're going to give an illustration similar to this. A young lady decides to buy a car, but she's got to do it in installments, and she has to make monthly payments. But at one point, she goes bankrupt. She squandered all her possessions, but she's got the car. But she's accountable to the car dealership. She has to pay them, but she has no means to pay. Now, the car dealership, they keep sending her letters. They're saying, come on, pay up, where's your payments? Whose name is on those letters? Well, it's her name. They're expecting payment from her. Now, let's say, for instance, some poor sucker ends up falling head over heels in love with her, and he pays her debt so that her car payments are all taken care of. She now owns the car. Can the car dealership have any further legal claims against him in the future? No. The debt's been paid. They really don't care about whose name is on there as long as they get the money when it comes down to it. Now that's an instance of commercial justice. It's a pecuniary matter. That's the only thing that the car dealership is worried about. So someone in that case can pay your debt for you. The Bible does not treat Jesus' death on the cross as a pecuniary matter. The atonement is not an issue of commercial justice. Let's take a look at this different illustration. Say that this young lady, instead of defaulting on her car payments, had actually went to the car dealership and stole the car and got caught. What does the car dealership have to do then? Are they simply interested in getting the money back? No, what she has done is she's committed a crime, an injury to the public good. She is now accountable to the courts. So she's called in before the judge, and he has to pass sentence on her. And that sentence has to be in accordance with what's written in the rule books. Stealing is not permissible in society. No one can pay her penalty for her. Justice is only satisfied when she's brought to justice, and she has to pay the price. She has to pay the penalty. That's what the satisfaction of justice demands. It cannot demand anything more than this, and it cannot demand anything less than this. The one to whom the precept is given is the one who has to pay the price if they violate it. What Jesus did on the cross is not the payment of a debt. It's not the satisfaction of justice. It's the opposite of the satisfaction of justice. That's what mercy is. It's not satisfying justice. Mercy is the opposite of it. It's not punishing. Now, this robber that's on the cross beside Jesus, he knew this. He had these realizations. For instance, he had the realization that his actions led him to a place of impending and certain judgment. He also had this realization that his sentence was just, that he deserved it. He had this sense that divine justice was coming swiftly for him. He also had this realization of being shut up to only, or closed in to only two alternatives. And he had this realization that his opportunity to throw himself on Jesus' mercy was a temporary opportunity, that the time was short, that now is the day of salvation. Perhaps today you're watching this and you're not a true, genuine believer in Christ. And you're conscious that you don't have forgiveness of sins. You have not been pardoned, and you do not have the joy of a relationship with God at this present. That you do not have the life of God in you, and you want that life. And you also have the realization that this opportunity to throw yourself on Jesus' mercy is a temporary opportunity. If you have those realizations, then you're ready. Stop in next time, and we're going to continue talking about salvation and the atonement. And again, without a firm understanding of the 3 R's of practical Christian theology, there's no way that you can enjoy and realize fully the joy of salvation in Christ. What Paul in Hebrews says, the so great a salvation